Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's a stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. Welcome to it, 10:30 here. Rumble.com/amradpod is where you can find us on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern time. We're grateful to have you along with us for the ride today, because we're going to be talking about the enemy within, almost a Trojan horse reference. We're going to be doing a deep dive on Garrett's latest Substack from lastline.substack.com, talking about a lot of the FBI failures in recent times, and for a retrospective as we are now approaching a new presidential administration, approaching a new FBI directorship. Also going to get into the latest iteration of the FBI playbook, which is an entrapment. And if we got some time, maybe lean into some directed energy weapons. Been reporting from the Blaze, fellow suspendable Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman did a nice piece on that. So if we got time, we're going to get to that. But we're going to go deep, because we're going to do some history today about Romania. So strap in, folks. Grateful to have you. If you haven't already, make sure you smash the thumbs up and follow the program. You listen to the audio format, subscribe to iTunes and iHeart, Spotify, any one of those, so you can get the shows when we update them, and we can continue to grow across all platforms to radicalize more Americans. So without further ado, today, Garrett's going to be driving the ship. A little bit of a different story for you today, my friend. We'll see how you handle it as the captain. You've got the con. Take it away.
It's weird, Steve. I don't like it, man. And for those who don't know, I hope I mask it well. I prefer writing. I prefer not being on camera. I prefer not talking. That may come as a shock to some, but I didn't want this for my life. I know you didn't either, but here we are, and we must carry on, because we have to speak the truth and drive forward, man. And it's as you were doing the intro there, I was thinking about my Substack a little bit. I'm trying to get back into the swing of it. I did one last week. I posted one this week, yesterday. If you're subscribed to it, thanks. Great. I appreciate that. But I was looking at my kind of like my writer's dashboard in there, and there's like 850 people subscribed. And I know in the grand scheme of media and whatnot, that's not a lot of people, but to me, that is a tremendous amount of people. I know not everybody reads them, or at least they don't all the time, or whatever. But every time there's at least a few hundred people who click it open, and that's kind of cool. And I hope people are getting something out of it. I get a lot out of it. That's why I like to do it. But also, I'm thinking of the beginning, and the beginning of the Substack was shortly after I quote unquote met you, because we didn't meet in person until we testified. So. But we met digitally after we both had been suspended. So I started the Substack after we were suspended, after we got our household goods, almost 2 months after they suspended me, until they finally said, "Oh, you can have your own stuff back. We won't hold it hostage from you any longer." But we're living in a rental house, and I needed some type of outlet to try to kind of come to terms with everything that was going on. And there were like 5 people who subscribed. My brother, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my wife. And but I would crank these Substacks out once a week, and um, it just started as that type of outlet. And I think you're familiar with my affinity for the story of Jonah, and that's kind of what prompted it. Is this idea of going to Nineveh. And I don't know if you're subscribed and you haven't read some of the older ones, you could go back, or maybe I'll start reposting some of those. But to get to the story of today, or jump in by all means, Steve, because I don't like steering the ship.
No, I think I sort of share your sentiment. I do some writing. I was actually going back and looking. I've had 15 editorials published in the last 2 years. So, I mean,
And
it's
you're a
not a
best-selling
ton.
author.
Best-selling author. Thanks, mom. And there's something about writing that if you have the itch, it just like kind of hits you. I don't know if maybe you have a similar experience to this, where it's you have these ideas, you need to get them out, and you can be so productive in a short time span, and you get a really good grasp of it when you put it down. I mean, we have conversations all the time. I'm reading all the time, and we can put forth that information. But anytime that I've written on a particular subject, that's when I have an aha moment where I connect the dots in a different way that I'm not really capable of doing. It definitely fires the neurons a little bit differently. So you putting that out again, it's lastline.substack.com where you can find all Garrett's writing. So the most recent one, you're going to have to do some translating for
Yeah.
on the title of this piece because that's not English. Get
I,
away.
I admit I don't know how to say that, but as I kind of got the idea for this Substack. So, for those just listening, you can't see the landing page where there's a picture. There's a picture of a Romanian revolutionary holding his fist up in the air. He's laying on the ground, and that picture comes from the 1989 Romanian Revolution. And so I knew of the revolution. I knew that Romania was an Eastern Bloc country. I knew some of this information, not as much as I know now. And take even this Substack. It might take someone 10 minutes to read, maybe. And if you're clicking the links and watching a video or two, I think there's just one video in there, and I recommend watching the video. It's only 5 minutes long. It's worth the time. But it it took me a handful of hours at least to put together, because you're researching, you're trying to get a better grasp of the subject matter, and then, like you said, connecting the dots in a different way, which I often try to do with the Substacks, tie it in either to my faith or to the FBI or to both, sometimes. And that's kind of what I did here. But so for those who don't know, in 1989, Romania, like a lot of these Eastern Bloc countries, they were pulling away from the Iron Curtain of Russia and communism, and they, like many, kicked off a revolution. And oddly enough, in my research for this, I didn't know this beforehand. I learned that they were the only country to revolt against communism who did it in a violent fashion. The rest of the nations, like Czechoslovakia, I think they refer to their revolution as the Velvet Revolution because it was so peaceful. But here in Romania, that was not the story, and part of that is because of the depths that the secret police service went to, which is they're called the Securitate, which I write about in that piece. They were so brutal and so wicked that I think a lot of the people had just had enough. And by the end, and I don't think I even really touch on this a ton, but by the end, a lot of the government forces turned on the government, and so there's soldiers and police and other government entities who are in their uniform and using their standard issued AKs and whatever else, and they're fighting the government forces along with the people. Because anybody who's familiar with tyranny, especially when it gets to that level, everybody's afraid. Every single person, except for maybe the tippy top people, and even them, they end up becoming fearful too of assassination or of a coup. And so even leadership gets very afraid too, because it's a wicked system, and it ties into that wicked heart of man that we talk about a lot here, where when you are instilling fear in others by ruling with an iron fist, you end up getting afraid yourself because you know at some point it's not going to last forever. You know, at some point it's not going the people aren't going to just let you continue to get away with that type of behavior because we all have an innate sense of what is right and wrong. We all have an innate sense of justice to some degree. And I know a lot of people will say, no, we don't, especially the Marxists and the atheists will say, no, we don't. There's no standard. You do you and I'll do me. But I would counter that with when just when you have emotion, when you see even something natural like the fires in California we talked about recently, or the hurricane in the North Carolina and Tennessee, it, when you see people going through hardship, you have or at least people who aren't sociopathic have, and which I would say is most, they have this sense of dread and empathy for their fellow human. That is far more natural than what a lot of the talking heads would say is you have your truth and I'll have mine.
I think that's also weaponized against people, as we saw the last 3 years with Ukraine against Russia. The human toll is something that everyone felt, and I think that's what drove people to post blue and gold flag emojis everywhere and do what they could. I mean, shoot, we did a photo shoot as a family for a woman who was taking all the proceeds and donating it for a humanitarian effort over there. I know that that entire conflict is a charade and a cabal and a way to launder money at this point. But I think that the human toll is something that, even despite the fact that it is corrupt, has gone on there. There are innocents by the millions who have been impacted, many of which are dead as a
Right.
result of it.
Right.
And we saw that that expansion of communism showed that. And I didn't know that about Romania being the only one that went violent. I know the Holodomor was involved in Ukraine, where they basically starved them. So I guess it was not kinetic, but still there was a death
Still,
toll in the
right.
millions as a result. It's the ideology behind Marxism and communism has resulted in over 100 million people dying in the last century, and still we think that it hasn't been done correctly. We
Yes,
need to redo it.
we just have to do it the right way, Steve. And now our generation, we're the ones who are going to do it right. You'll see. Just wait, Steve. You'll see.
True
But
Kamalamanism has not
yes,
been tried.
but that idea of empathy being weaponized against the populace, absolutely. Uh, for me, it really hit on my first deployment when I went to Iraq, and for a year. You know, you're there for an entire year, and you're seeing people maimed and killed and wounded, and women treated poorly, and you see it, and you're told, well, you can't intervene there. Their culture's different, you know, and we're here for the mission, whatever the mission is, you know. And I remember coming to this conclusion of I wish everyone could be an American. We can't. Not everyone in the world can be. We are very lucky and blessed to be here, even with the hardship that we have, even with our own corruption. And I touch on it in the Substack article from this week about tyranny. And we're big fans of language here because we know it matters and we know people like to twist it, but the definition of tyranny is arbitrary abuse of authority, is essentially what it boils down to: arbitrary abuse or despotic abuse of authority. And that's the crux, is that arbitrariness. And there's a scale, sure, like a Kamala Harris scale is not the same as a Nicolae uh, Ceausescu scale. So Ceausescu was the Romanian dictator at the time. Far worse than Joe Biden. Okay, I think we could all agree on that. But that scale is sliding, and we've seen it. We saw it. We've seen it here in our own nation, and I think, well, I'd imagine that people who are watching or listening to this show probably do agree. But there are enough people out there still who they either have TDS or who knows what is blinding them from seeing that government always goes down that road. It always goes down the road to tyranny. And I really do think we're in a unique position in our own history to either keep pushing in that direction or to hopefully stem the tide of it a little bit.
All right, so you eventually write through this piece and you get to the FBI and the recent abuses that we've seen. And we did that 3 episode Saturdays in a row where we did the look back on 2024 news events. Um, and was at the time going through the experience of, oh, I forgot that happened. Oh, I forgot that happened. I've been reading through this, had that sort of similar thing. Like they were all familiar to me, but it's just kind of washes over you. So let's bring it up and we can work our way through them. These are these abuses that have happened. Did you try to set it for any sort of time?
I tried to put it in. Well, actually, so when I was writing this section, I thought, okay, what could I include in here? And initially, I went back historically, and I thought, okay, well, I could go to the 1920s with the Palmer raids, which I think we've talked about here before, or I could go to the 1930s with the predecessor to the FBI. Rounding up Japanese and putting them in internment camps, or I could go to civil rights and talk and just list COINTELPRO and all these things initially were flooding. And I was like, well, wait a second, let me just think about what I could put from the recent history. And
Things
so
we all lived through.
right. And so I literally only went back to 2016. And I still didn't include anywhere near as many of them as I could have. We talked about Amy Nelson the other day. I didn't include her story. We talked Kyle recently had Alpha Warrior on, Alfredo Luna. If you guys don't know his story, you go listen to that podcast or even the previous one that Kyle and Alpha did probably a couple years ago now. That is weaponization, that is tyranny, and there's many other examples. We've talked about, I forget her name, you'll probably remember, but the Holocaust camp survivor who was arrested on a FACE Act charge.
Yeah,
I didn't
89 years old.
I didn't include that story.
Douglas Mackey.
Douglas Mackey didn't include it. Countless J6ers stories that we could tell. Colt Maccabee is one that comes to mind for me. And there are many others
They
too.
just arrested a J6er yesterday,
Yesterday. I
3
mean, think of that.
days before an inauguration. He was such a violent, vicious criminal that they couldn't get around to it for over 4 years. But they had to do that, right? So, well, let's get to what you did get in there. And like the big one, I think everyone knows is Russiagate.
Yep.
But there are elements to that. There's even layers to that.
Oh,
I mean, it's this like umbrella term where we, basically, if you haven't done the research and learning about it, you just know the FBI is involved in some sort of election scheme, right? There's some sort of collusion, which isn't a legal term, where they tried to paint Donald Trump as being a stooge of Russia and they were helping him steal the election, hack the election, if you will. That's what they use. And Garrett, you brushed over Hillary Clinton before that.
yes,
Shall not be prosecuted.
I know.
But Russiagate was going on at that exact
Uh-huh.
same time.
Yep.
So element of it, the Klein-Smith
Yes.
email, which he was not held accountable for. He couldn't practice law for a year.
Mhm. Which is nothing. I mean, that is nothing. That's barely a slap on the wrist. If
What is
anything,
the email for those who don't know?
yeah, okay. So yes, for those who don't know, Kevin Klein-Smith was an FBI attorney working with the likes of Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and other top upper echelons of the agency to really try to get Donald Trump. And that again, that's a telltale sign of tyranny is when and of a secret police force is when they are weaponized to go against their political, social, and religious enemies, dissidents, whatever term you want to use to call them. It's typically social, political, and religious. Because if anybody knows history of Marxism, they want to stomp out organized religion because government is God. And we all of us, all the suspendals talk about that a lot, is that government is your God and they're going to force themselves to be your God and you're going to like it. So in this case, it is the political, and I guess in the interesting era we live in, Donald Trump is a political and social enemy of the state. So they had to get him. And so they had some FISA wiretaps on one of Donald Trump's campaign staffers, essentially. And even going into this a little bit again recently, I forget who that was. Was it Paul Manafort?
Carter Page?
Carter Page. It was Carter Page who they had a FISA on. And I've written about this in my Substack too, way in the beginning. I did a couple on FISA and in Twitter files where I kind of dive into Russiagate to give it a broader synopsis. But so the FBI opens a FISA on Carter Page, but the information that they got came from the Steele dossier, which we found out later was paid for by the Democrat National Convention and Hillary Clinton's campaign. And the information in there is not true. It's it's basically made out of whole cloth, not substantiated, not not checked through multiple sources, not confirmed through foreign governments who are friendly with us. None of that. Just give us something that we can use to say, see, there's Russian collusion. And so they had a couple FISAs. So for those who don't know, a FISA is Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That came out of the wake of the uh, um, church committee in the 70s, and it was supposed to fix the issues that we had in this country with law enforcement tapping people's phones. One of whom was Martin Luther King. They tapped his phone, didn't have that's a whole other story. But so they get a FISA for Carter Page, and when you have a FISA and you're tapping people's phones, communications, whatever, you have 30 days. That's basically what the court order is. Same with a Title III wiretap. You get it for 30 days, and then you go back to the judge with the information that you obtained that leads you to believe reasonably. That's the whole standard again, is you have to have probable cause, because a FISA or a Title III, they are essentially a search warrant. And they're the most intrusive kind of search warrant because it's live action, listening to people's communications. So they have these FISAs. They know they don't have anything there. Kevin Kleinsmith gets an email, he alters it and sends it off. So the piece he altered was so it would appear that they had probable cause to continue the FISA application. And the judge signed off on it 3 times. So they continued this FISA for 90 days. And it's based on a lie, because the investigators, including Kevin Kleinsmith, this lawyer, knew that they shouldn't have continued the FISA because they weren't gaining actionable intelligence to corroborate the probable cause that they thought they had. Which, let's be frank, they didn't have probable cause. They never did, because it was all based on a freaking scam.
The lie that they used to get the FISA and keep it going on Carter Page was that Carter Page was in communications with Russia, with someone from Russia, with the government, somebody. So we'll just say Russia. But what they didn't tell the court, and they lied by omission, was that the FBI went over to the CIA and said that Carter Page is in contact with Russia. And the CIA said, yeah, we know. He came to us and told us, and we're working with him on that. He's aiding the American government, right? The FBI said to the judge, Carter Page is in contact with Russia. We went to the CIA, and the CIA confirmed he's in contact with Russia. No further information. So you could see how you could present all fair and accurate information, but give the exact opposite impression, which is what they did to get the FISAs. And the FISAs give you the opportunity to hop amongst people. By really monitoring Carter Page and a couple others, they could access the entire Donald Trump campaign at that point. And then we haven't even gotten into things like Lisa Page and Peter Schrock, the Lovebirds, and the Steele dossier in general you touched on as being just completely farcical. It was Oppo research provided to them by the Hillary Clinton campaign, and they lied about that as well. The individual who brought it forward said, I'm just a lawyer. I'm not being paid by the Hillary Clinton campaign, as he was being paid by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And the leaks went on where they only had one fake dossier, so they leaked information to the media so the media could report it, and they could say, oh, now we have the media reporting on it that we leaked to the media. It was a circular reporting that then led to a special prosecutor and investigations and plagued the entire first Trump administration. And then we get to the efforts to get to the second administration, the second election interference, and that was the Hunter Biden laptop, which the FBI had in its possession, given to them, and then knew that it was given over to Rudy Giuliani because they had an illegal wiretap. And they
see how this all works together, you know?
They allowed that 51 spies who lies letter to be drafted at the request of Antony Blinken within 6 hours by the CIA as a talking point. Meanwhile, the FBI had the laptop in evidence and actually used it. But before they did that, they went to social media and told them to censor that story, election interference. But the FBI used the laptop, verified its existence to prosecute Hunter Biden in 2024 and got a conviction, which was promptly overturned by a pardon from Joe Biden. So, what about Pegasus, though? I don't think people are really tracking on that one. That's the third one there.
Yeah, Pegasus is an interesting piece. That was one of those ones that I forgot about. And as I was putting this together and basically just doing um uh you know not Google but search engine research on what I wanted to put in here, just trying to find relatively recent examples, I came across Pegasus again, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot all about Pegasus." And so I'll actually pop up the link. And this is the thing with the Substack, I try to put lots of links in there. I know a lot of people don't click them, and that's fine. I don't hold any grudge there, but I try to bring receipts where I think it's appropriate. And this article, I think, what year was this? 2022 is when this article was published. And the headline says internal documents show how close the FBI came to deploying spyware. Now, back then, Christopher Wray, the outgoing, disgraced FBI director, he testified. He testified that they were not using this spyware called Pegasus. So Pegasus is basically spyware that they can essentially install on anybody. They can install it on any of your devices that they want. And they bought it from this company in Israel in 2018. And Christopher Wray's claim was, well, we're not using it. And it's like, okay, well, why would you buy it then if you're not going to use it? And the claim from the FBI and Christopher Wray under sworn testimony was that they bought it for research purposes, Steve, and that
That's what every pedophile says when you bust them with the kitty porn.
yes.
I'm just researching.
I'm just trying to stop the pedophiles. So I had to look at what they look at to stop them. But so that was his claim that they weren't using it, and that's not really entirely true. Oddly enough, last night, or maybe it was 2 nights ago, I saw this article on ACLJ's website where they listed the FBI's top 5 um, worst basically worst examples of weaponization under Christopher Wray. And they also listed Pegasus. And I thought, hey, are they using Pegasus on me? And got a sneak peek at my Substack. But also with Pegasus, this quote from the link, which is a New York Times article, it says, which is also this I did put in the Substack. It says Pegasus gained notoriety when it was revealed that governments like Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Hungary, and India had deployed it against political dissidents, journalists, and human rights workers. The FBI has paid $5 million since 2018. Well, I guess in that 4-year span, who knows now how much they've paid, because it's probably like a subscription, which you probably know what a Celebrite is. I'm sure you do. Other people probably don't. A Celebrite is a machine that was created in Israel as well. Let's be clear, their counter intel program is very good. It it pretty much always has been since they were established as a state again after World War II, and they're an ally of ours. I know there can be some quibbles about that and how and to what degree we are truly allied with them and they allied with us, but our government has paid for things like Pegasus and things like Celebrite. A Celebrite, you plug a phone into it and you basically can download everything from that phone. And I know the FBI was paying a contract to use those machines as well. So Pegasus is probably similar. So if they paid 5 million in 4 years, it's been about 4 more years, maybe 10 million now, probably a little bit more because I'm sure those fees have gone up. But I just love how they claim that they weren't using it. They weren't using it in criminal or counterterrorism or counterintelligence investigations because, well, we're not quite sure about the legalities of it. And for me, I can't sit here and say I believe that, because what the things I saw in the FBI, I questioned a lot of the legality and a lot of the understanding of what other agents and supervisors thought they could do. And most of them, or at least plenty of them, thought they could do whatever they wanted. And that's not the case. And I think when you look through just the recent history of the FBI, like we're going through here, that I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion.
And there's 19 total abuses, and you go into targeting of parents at school boards and military veterans and religious Christians. Um, I don't want to give away everything, but I do want to get into the threat tag to target political religious dissidents. I don't think we've really covered that at great length. I think it's probably worth a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so this is the threat tag. Man, it's so weird, Steve, when you kind of start digging back through your brain um about what we've done, what we've been through, what what the FBI has done to us, our families. So that threat tag is the threats to SCOTUS 2022 threat tag that was created after the Dobbs decision. And this is one of the things that I whistle blew to Congress, and the only reason it came out publicly is because information about my deposition, just like you and George, was leaked. Was leaked to the media when we were told that it was basically confidential. Well, then it gets leaked, and so then I I don't know this for certain, but my belief is that then after Democrats leaked information, then the Republican side said, "Hey, well, we gotta put something else out to counter this," and this information about this threat tag was one of those things, and so the threats to SCOTUS threat tag was created in the wake of the leak of the Dobbs decision, and I don't know how long it was. It was probably within a couple weeks. And the FBI created this threat tag similar to the school board threat tag. And initially I was like, okay, yeah, because there are legitimate threats. There was that guy who traveled from California going to Washington D.C. He wanted to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh.
Still hasn't been prosecuted.
How, I did not know that. But think about that. He still hasn't been prosecuted. So now we all know that there isn't, quote unquote, a domestic terrorism law on the books, but there is a domestic terrorism definition. And in the FBI, it's a three-pronged definition. It's some type of political ideology, and some type of threat of violence, and like the means to do it, or something like that. I forget off the top. I have it written down somewhere, but those are essentially the three prongs. This guy was caught with weapons and ammo, and then admitted or had documentation somehow indicating that he wanted to go kill Justice Kavanaugh, and still hasn't been prosecuted. So the FBI creates this threat tag, and on its face, it looks like, yeah, that's legitimate. But with with the FBI, they send guidance on how to use the threat tag, when to use it, when to attach it to the information that you're uploading into their systems. And that is where the devil is in the details, is because once you read the guidance, it was targeting pro-life people. And one of the main reasons I whistleblew this was because within a day, maybe two, but I want to say it was within 24 hours of learning about the threat tag, then I got canvassed for from headquarters to interview one of my CHSs who was a pro-life guy. And all of these questions that they wanted me to ask were related to how Christians were going to retaliate, how pro-life people were going to retaliate. Is there anybody planning to firebomb any abortion clinics? Is there anybody hatching some sort of plot to harm abortion doctors? And I remember reading that information and thinking, that doesn't make any sense. And that has nothing to do with threats to SCOTUS. And so with the similar links between using the threat tag on, and the way they pitched it was something to the effect of any abortion related extremism. And it's like, well, wait a second here. Wait. Just a minute. Because especially now looking back, we know when do they use the FACE Act, Steve?
92% of the time against pro-lifers. And I had the
Mhm.
exact same experience because I had the weird position where I was officially on a joint terrorism task force focusing on domestic terrorism. And all the cases I was actually actively working were child pornography and human trafficking cases. My boss was even like, "What you going on here, Steve?" And I'm like, "Well, there's no work to do." And I thought, because I was getting heat because we weren't hitting the quota for the number of informants I was supposed to have. Also pointed out in your Substack there, lastline.substack.com. I didn't have any snitches because in child pornography, there are no snitches because those are suspects. If they know a lot about that world, nobody's doing research for real. Okay. And I had pressure on me to get a source. They said, we don't care. It could be a drug source. And I said, well, why wouldn't the drug agent have them? That doesn't make any sense. And then I had the aha moment, that flash of genius. And I said, I'm going to reach out in light of the leak from Supreme Court to crisis pregnancy centers. There were 2 of them.
And it's a great idea. Think just from an investigatory standpoint, that is such a good idea. So you have it. I just love it because I know what happened, and I know you're gonna share. But from a law enforcement standpoint, when you are not supposed to inject your biases into these, you want to have a broader vision of the threat. So, okay, I can liaise with the abortion doctor who's calling every other week about protesters on the public sidewalk. But now when I say, hey, don't you think it's a good idea to go to the pregnancy crisis centers? What happened?
The ones that had never been approached ever by the FBI,
Ever.
they were, in my opinion, probably going to be good sources of information because they could be victims of domestic terrorism, right? There could be a firebomb, or they could be a resource for human trafficking. What if a young lady came on through and there was something that just wasn't connecting, right? That could be an avenue for me to actually impact either one of the violations that I was working. Brought that back. And there was some level of like helmet stickers and backslapping because my executive leadership was very proud and happy to take credit for my idea and had me brief it to multiple agencies in Florida. And then my senior leadership told me that I really needed to focus on abortion clinics because they were really the ones that were at risk. To which my response was, the only people who burn the city down that they live in when their team wins are Lakers fans. I don't think that pro-lifers are going to be setting abortion clinics on fire when they're not going to be functional when the decision comes out. But again, back to the threat tag and the way that it was going to be weaponized, it was only going one way, always. So I think it's a great read. Everyone, make sure you go check it out. Lastline.substack.com is the most recent one there. Good history lesson, worth your time. Garrett, just keep on punching them out. And then let's pivot on over to another example of the enemy within. And we I don't love to, or I mean, I think that it's valuable to actually interpret a lot of these FBI terrorism entrapments that go on. The playbook, you find the vulnerable person, you use the informants and the undercovers, get them to do something they were not predisposed or capable of doing, spring the trap, and everybody gets promoted off of that. And Ken Silva, who's rapidly becoming a must-read, wrote an article about this and actually had a link to the charging document, which I did a deep dive on. And we're going to present the whole full story because we don't want to shortchange anybody on the details. But the title of Ken's piece over at headlineusa.com is Undercover FBI Agent Recruited Target to Join ISIS. And he gets into some of the details, but I think that the actual charging document is worth looking at, which is here. United States District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina. Our bad guy's name here is Alexander Justin White, a.k.a. Suleiman al-Amariki. And, I dug through it. We're not going to be, having that image up there the whole time. I'll just kind of look off screen as I do because there's quite a bit of information in here that I think sets the stage for a pretty clear resolution or conclusion that we can get from this. So
is he an incel, Steve?
He's 29 years old, doesn't seem to have a lot of friends.
Okay.
And I think
how about that?
We'll be really comfortable calling him retarded. Okay. Again, as is now the trend, they are not blacking out the names of the affiants for these charges documents. The agents or the task force officers who normally say that they're secret agents and we can't know their identity. Well, they're publishing them now.
What do you attribute that to?
Hubris. They're proud of what they're doing.
Okay.
And it certainly from this particular person who's been in the Bureau since 2017 and has done 3 years in Washington field office. And then she got to go to Raleigh, North Carolina after 3 years in Washington field office.
3 years.
How many people did she jump in line? Did she jump in line to get to Raleigh? I think a lot.
A lot.
Monica Van Hooser.
I would
is her
really
name.
like to know the details on that transfer, Steve. Because
Charlotte Division is one of the most sought after field offices in the FBI, and particularly the Raleigh resident agency.
Yep. I mean, it's when I think of my short-lived time in the FBI, and I think of the places people wanted to go, and look, everybody, you could go in our information system and look, and you could see what the wait
How
list was
many
like.
people were in front of you?
Yeah. And you could see how many vacancies there were in any office. And you know, you might get hopeful, like, oh yeah, maybe I'm going to get to go to Myrtle Beach or Charlotte, or there's a very select handful of offices that a lot of people want to go to. And you really can't blame them. I would go to any of those. Daytona Beach, Jacksonville, you know, Salt Lake City. There's a Denver, another big one. And we had a guy. Well, we talked about it when we had Trevor Aronson on, and when we covered Alphabet Boys, they had him on recording. Brandon Kimball. I'm not afraid to say the name because it's already known. It's already out there. He pulled one of those dirty deals. Granted, in his case, it was when they still had that program where if your spouse makes X amount of money more than you or whatever, and it could be detrimental. I think he fudged it quite a bit to make it stick, but he was able to transfer out to Colorado Springs or somewhere like that. And
he fudged it like the guy from Los Angeles who transferred to Omaha because his wife was a doctor and she made a lot of money, and she just couldn't get a job in Los Angeles. So there's no medical care out there whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, even this pre-fire, so nothing had burned down yet. But they got to transfer to Omaha because they didn't want to live in LA. I mean, so people game the system all the time. So,
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk about Mr. White now, right? He started to post ISIS propaganda videos on Facebook.
Which
is that illegal?
That's not illegal. Okay. You don't have to like it. We talk about this all the time with the First Amendment. You don't have to like it.
He posted a quote, which he put quotations about. So it's not actually original to him. He just posted on Facebook the following quote: "The one who fights in the cause of Allah has a guarantee from Allah. Either he will raise him to his forgiveness and mercy, or he will send him back with reward and spoils of war." Unquote. Is that a call to violence?
No.
That seems like almost like a scripture.
Yeah.
But we are seeing the FBI go after people for posting scripture. So I guess they're nothing if not consistent with intrusions on the First Amendment. Finally, wouldn't you know it, an online covert employee approaches Mr. White, sends him, the online undercover employee sends him a screenshot of a pro-ISIS channel claiming that it fundraises for detained ISIS members and their dependents. So the government actor sends the subject, the target, the link where he can provide material support to terrorism.
Sign me up.
Then, this is all on Facebook, by the way. We still haven't even done a face-to-face, right?
Yeah.
Mr. White had conversations with multiple Facebook users, 7 of them. Said he was trying to send financial aid, but it had to go through the European Union. So he's retarded, right? Like
Yeah.
he just is dealing with an inability to use Zelle or money orders or anything like that. He has some sort of idea that the European Union is a way to send finances to a terrorist organization. White told 4 Facebook users, again, all on Facebook. Thank you very much, Agent Monica Van Hooser.
Yeah.
Told 4 Facebook users that he intended to travel and join ISIS. Well, that's a little bit disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get back to, is he capable? Right? I mean, look, I might want to go to the moon, but I'm not an astronaut. So I can say, like, I intend to do interstellar travel one day, and Elon Musk doesn't know my name, so it's not going to happen, right? So further on, the online covert employee, again, posed himself as an ISIS facilitator and asked White, again, the government agent asking the target, if he wanted to join ISIS. provided him a questionnaire, because that's what ISIS does.
Yes,
They
we
provide
gotta
you a questionnaire like a job
yeah, we gotta
application.
vet you properly through
Again,
Facebook.
if you take the questionnaire from the ISIS facilitator and think it's legit, you're retarded. Okay. It asked him for his emergency contacts, to which he
My
provided
mom.
his grandfather
Oh,
and his grandfather's phone number. So now granddad has an open counterintelligence
yes,
investigation on
yes.
him. And now we go move off of the online covert employee to the confidential human source, which Garrett documents in his Substack. The FBI spent how much money last year on?
Well, on average, so we don't know current numbers, but in 2018, on average, so I think it was like 3 or 4 years prior to that, the average was 42 million a year on CHSs.
So this confidential human source, the CHS, initiated the government actor initiated a Zoom call with White. And he posed as a spokesman from ISIS because White didn't speak Arabic. So they needed to have a conversation with him in English. And this guy thought, I can't speak Arabic, but I can go over and join ISIS. Again, he's retarded. The online covert employee gets back involved and he asked White his preferred placement because he's the facilitator in White's interpretation, right? That he is going to get him to join ISIS. What job do you want when you come on over here? They're more open than the FBI. Like
Yes.
the FBI, they're like, hey, general idea of what you'd like to work. And they're like, that's great.
Mhm.
You have an accounting degree. You're going to white collar.
Uh-huh.
I know you want to work gangs, but no. Right. He asked White his preferred placement and gave him the following options: computer operations, money matters, food work, or military/fighting. To which White replied, military units.
Of course. That's the sexy one, Steve.
Well, further information is given to us in this charging document, which is publicly available. The link to it from the headline USA piece by Ken Silva, again called Undercover FBI Agent Recruited Target to Join ISIS. And it says that he owns firearms and he went shooting.
Okay.
Hey, owning firearms as a not convicted felon and going shooting in America, is that illegal?
No, not.
Then they got pictures of him shooting because they always get
Of
pictures
course,
of them
gotta
shooting.
get the
Right?
pictures. Gotta get the pictures.
All right. White told people on Facebook he was frustrated because he thought he might have missed his opportunity to join ISIS in the past when ISIS was an actual threat, like in 2014, because then the Trump administration came in and ISIS became was. But it's still an ideology, a predicated ideology that the FBI likes to keep on its books, particularly because young men who are retarded don't remember groups like Boko Haram or Al Qaeda or Al Shabaab. ISIS is really easy to remember. It's only 2 letters. So we go on through this, and the online covert employee asks White when he would be ready to travel. He says, quote, maybe by early December. And then he booked a flight to Morocco.
Mm.
He also bought boots and a medical kit and a chest rig, and he was arrested at the airport,
They like
providing
those.
material support to terrorism.
Mhm.
At no point did I see any transferring of funds, but we're going to charge him with material support to terrorism. And now Monica Van Hooser, she's already in Raleigh. I mean, where's she going to go to next? Hilton Head? Like, how can you get better than Raleigh? But she's got a
Ye
career case, right?
That's exactly what I
She's
was
done.
gonna bring up is what do they call this, Steve? They call this a career case. So think of that. Think of this for you taxpayers out there. If an agent who needs to work a minimum of 20 years to retire, if they do one case like this, the FBI has accepted that that is a career case and your career is now made and you might get a director's award that year that you did the case. You might get transferred to Raleigh because that's where you wanted to go. You are made. You're done. You've made
She
it.
was hired in 2017. So she's got, at a minimum, I don't know how old she is. She's got the next 12 to 13 years because January. So 12 years, she'll get to her 20 to not do anything ever again. And she will have all these accolades and trophies. And particularly because she's a she, will never be expected to work again. And that is not offensive to say. I mean, that is normal conversation.
Yes.
Oh yeah, she worked a career case, so she's
Yes.
kind of good. We don't expect her to do anything anymore.
Yep. Very common. Very common. If you and my time was all on the JTTF, and right in the very beginning, it was if you can get a the terrorism charge of you just read it, material support.
Material
If you can
support.
get the material support charge, you've done it. You've ascended. You've made it. And how many examples, Steve, do we have to bring where it is this? It is the playbook. How many? I couldn't even tell you how many times we have covered the playbook here. And here's another one now. And it's funny. I'm going to pull this up. This is from the DOJ's website. We talked about gaslighting recently. Well, just on the last show we did.
Oh yeah, this is good. This is a good link. I've read this before, where they
So,
defend the fact that they can entrap people.
yeah. So right here on the Department of Justice's website, entrapment, outrageous government conduct. And I'll just read a little bit. It says, while the essence of the entrapment defense is the defendant's lack of predisposition to commit the offense, the quote defense of outrageous government conduct presupposes predisposition, but seeks dismissal of the indictment on the ground that the conduct of law enforcement agents was so outrageous that due process principles would absolutely bar the government from invoking judicial process to obtain a conviction. How is that not the case in every single one of these?
That's a
From
lot of gobbledygook.
it's a lot of it's
Can
very
can
Orwellian.
can you interpret that at a level that Mr. White might have understood?
Yes. So they essentially are saying that when they arrest somebody like Mr. White, that he was predisposed to commit this conduct, and the government did not engage in outrageous conduct. They engaged in conduct to show that predisposition.
Mhm.
But this is just the thing. He never would have done it if it wasn't for government actors doing, and they quote this from United States v. Russell. Mr. White never would have done this if the government didn't engage in quote conduct that was quote so outrageous that due process principles would absolutely bar the government from invoking judicial process to obtain a conviction. How outrageous does it have to be?
It's the photo negative of how our justice system is supposed to operate, where you have a presumption of innocence. This use of entrapment, or this way around entrapment, is a presupposition, a presumption that you are guilty, you have ill intent, you have a predisposition to do and engage in violent activities in furtherance of your ideology. And we just had to flesh that out. But in order to do that, we need to talk to you about your ideology, maybe groom you, radicalize you further, poke you as much as necessary. Doing this, of course, to people who are typically low intelligence, emotionally disturbed. They're not really squared away people. And then convince you that your worst idea is actually a good idea. And we can help you carry it forward. And then when we do that, we say, hey, do you want to go do a terrorism? Do you want to go do a terrorism? Do you want to go do a terrorism? And after years, sometimes the person just says, okay, because they think you're their friend and they have no other friend in the world. You say, you just got to push that button. You just got to push that button. You just got to push that button. You want to push the button, right? And then when
I
he
really
says, yeah,
want
or he does it, that overt act, which they have put the button in your hand and been hammering you with messages with online undercovers, in-person undercovers, confidential human sources, that reveals that all along you had a predisposition. You've been guilty since the very beginning, which again, it is a bizarro world. It's a photo negative version of what our justice system is, and that is you have a presumption of innocence. And that is how they've gotten around this entrapment to the point where these defendants a lot of times cannot use entrapment as a defense. The
right.
judges don't let them.
They won't let them.
It's
And
a
that's
bastardization of our system.
yes. That again, that is the definition of tyranny. Because how arbitrary is that in the alleged land of the free? The judge won't even allow you to use a defense. Why can't these people use that defense? And they say, oh, well, we've already determined that you were predisposed to do this conduct. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't have taken the bait.
Well,
You
trust
wouldn't
the experts. They know your predisposition. So you can't present that to a jury, which allegedly is supposed to hold it's your fate in their hands because they're supposed to be the arbiter of what actually happened, as the lay person who wasn't really involved. They're nonpartisan. They're vetted to be impartial, but they can't hear those facts. They can only hear the facts that the government wants them. And we always go back to, you'll do the nice sheep impression of national
Mhm.
security.
Yes, it's always national security. We got to keep you safe. No, you don't. I prefer the dangerous liberty to your definition of safety because you're not keeping us safe. You're, I would say, we're at a point where you're instilling fear. We talked about it in the wake of New Year's Day. We talked about it because I think we talked about it here. The that the mosque that the dude who drove through,
Jabbar.
yeah, they said don't talk to the FBI. Contact our attorneys at CARE first. And I was quote tweeting and responding to people saying, "Oh, this is," I was saying, "No, I don't blame them. I wouldn't recommend anyone talk to the FBI." And because look, as we're very clear about here, we have a biblical worldview, not an Islamic worldview, not a Quran worldview. But we live in America still. And so I don't care if you're Muslim, atheist, Sikh, Hindu, Christian, agnostic, don't talk to the FBI. Plain and simple. Why would you? And so there are people acting like the mosque was in collusion with the terrorist. I mean, that's what he was. He was radicalized to terrorism. But why? Just because Islamic people in this country have been targeted by the FBI more than most in the last 25 years? So that makes them all bad suddenly? I'm sorry. In America, that's not how it's supposed to be. And I think it ties into what we talk about with the First Amendment from MTSU's study that they did, that they put out on Constitution Day last year. 60% of Americans claim to enjoy the First Amendment and claim to believe in free speech. But then when someone says something that they disagree with, well, then they don't like it so much.
Free speech for me, but not for thee.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned how we have a particular worldview. It is not Sikh or sick. Garrett, why don't you give it to us today? We're going to save the directed energy weapons for another day. Maybe by the time they have two parts to this, because it's going
Yeah.
to be an ongoing series, and I'm really interested to see the next one from Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman. But take it away, sir. You again have the con.
Yeah. So first I'm going to go to the Quran, Steve. I know, shocking, right? But I think it's just interesting in the wake of this case and of what is considered free speech from the Quran itself. This says, indeed, the penalty for those who wage war against Allah and his messenger and spread mischief in the land is death, crucifixion, cutting off their hands and feet on opposite sides, or exile from the land. This penalty is a disgrace for them in this world, and they will suffer a tremendous punishment in the hereafter. Or this one, but once the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists who violated their treaties wherever you find them. Capture them, besiege them, and lie in wait for them on every way. But if they repent, perform prayers, and pay alms tax, then set them free. Indeed, Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. You could post this on Facebook because it comes from their holy book. And this wouldn't be considered hate speech. This wouldn't be considered terroristic rhetoric. But hey, if the FBI sees you post it, they might slide into your DMs. But now, and I've read this verse before. It's Isaiah 59:14. It says, "Justice is turned back, and righteousness stands far away. For truth has stumbled in the public square, and uprightness cannot enter." And this is why we're here. Obviously, our bent is towards law enforcement and the Constitution. That's what we know. But overall, truth has stumbled in the public square. I think in the last couple of years under Joker Joe Biden, there's been a little bit of a resurgence of people saying, no, it's time to speak. It's past time to speak. And, I think we all need to band together and speak truth openly and boldly in the public square so that we can stem that tide of tyranny.
All right. Some heavy topics today we got to, but it was always worthwhile. And again, final Shameless plug. No shame in that. Lastline.substack.com. Make sure you go check out Garrett's Substack there and read the full accounting of just the most recent ones that came to his mind. And he stopped it off at 19 FBI abuses. Pal Glenn, just kind of out of nowhere. I really like Nate Bargatze, so he's been popping up in my feed quite a bit. So just here's a nice little short about, I don't know, getting a little bit older.
That's the next phase of my life, getting up early, you know. We're getting up at 9:15 a little bit. Yeah, I've never seen my daughter go to school, but I've been close. I'm cold now, too, that I'm old. 45, I just get cold. I always have to bring a jacket. It could be 135 degrees outside, and I will walk around with a jacket. And I see these young people, and I just think, where are your jackets? My body's falling apart. My shoulder hurts because I stand on stage like this. It's crazy. This was a huge mistake to get into this. If I had known that this would be a big problem, I would have probably tried to not make it a habit.
Look, the joys of clean, family-friendly comedy are out there.
Yes.
I always appreciate seeing him. He's just a sharp guy. I've actually seen him in person. It's
really?
an enjoyable experience. I was patient zero. I got sick as a dog when I saw him. So sorry, Orlando, about that one. Hopefully nobody perished as a result of it. But that's it for us today on the American Radicals podcast. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back with you Tuesday at 10:30 Eastern time here at rumble.com/amradpod. Until then, have a good day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.